All right. Welcome, everybody. Today is February the 6th, 2019, and this is the monthly Cloud Provider vSphere call. So we had, this was actually canceled a few times in the past month. So I think we haven't met since November, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just pull up the agenda on my screen so we can look at what we have here. And let's see, where's where's my screen? I lost my screen. All right. Cool. So, if you're on the call, please add your name to the list of attendees. I'm gonna add mine. So we don't have many updates on the cloud provider front since we've been shifting focus towards cluster API and CSI in the past few months. So, but we do have some updates, and we just wanted to review some of the progress we made since the last time we met and give a brief update on the current status. And we actually had a pretty major problem with the in-tree cloud provider in the past week. We fixed and pushed upstream. So we're going to look at that problem and maybe brainstorm a little bit if that is something we should have to fix in the auto tree implementation too, because they do have different code paths in that specific portion. So I'm not sure we're going to end up in the same situation. But let's quickly review what happened since last time. So last time, and I'm moving back to the agenda of November 7th, we wanted to move the meeting time to 9 a.m. Pacific explicitly, so that happened. And at the time, we had a problem introducing breaking changes. So this was about the configuration parsing library that was basically panicking if there was a configuration parameter that was not in the struct that was parsed, and it will just make the cloud provider panic. I think we fixed that, and I think David, you work on that, if I'm not mistaken, changing the way that the GCFG library was parsing the input.
Yeah, I did work on that. Yep.
All right, I think that was fixed, and I think we actually did a release after that. We should have tagged 010, which was the very first version um, during KubeCon US, so it's December timeframe. So that change was, I think that change made it into the very first release, so shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, and then the third one that was in the old agenda was actually start tagging CCM versions, and I think we did that. And we're about to probably tag another version now that there's zone support. So, and David, correct me if I'm wrong here, but zone support has been merged in the cloud provider, and it's currently working in the same way that is working in tree. So we have feature parity for cloud provider, and I think the work right now that is pending is just on the CSI and the storage side. Is
Yeah,
that
that's right. So the zone support in the CCM should is yeah completely identical to the one entry, and we have for the on the CSI side for the zone support, we have technically I guess one looks good to me, and then there was one that was removed which was Travis's. Because I just had some minor updates based on what Andrew Kim had provided feedback on. So I think it's just ready to go. We're just waiting for the other rubber stamp and then a merge for that PR.
perfect? So for the CCM, I think we're going to be ready probably to tag pretty soon. I will guess we will wait for CSI to stabilize and then probably tag both since both lives in the same repo. We do have CCM and CSI both living in the same repo, and I think we did tag a different version of 011 on CSI, where the CCM code was basically identical to the previous release. We're going to probably do another 012 for both pretty soon once the CSI patch for zone support is merged. And I think that's pretty much it for zone support. The thing that I was mentioning before for the problem we had with the entry provider is we were getting some feedback from one of the folks that are working on the Kubernetes clusters on vSphere at a large bank, and apparently they hit an interesting bug on the entry cloud provider. The entry cloud provider, um, at some point when it has to patch the node IP, it has a code path that is basically testing against a specific list of OUI, so MAC addresses. So you have a MAC address that has to be owned by VMware, and MAC addresses have basically 12 digits, and the first 6 digits are static and they're assigned to specific vendors. Apparently, VMware has 4 blocks for OUI assigned, while the intra-cloud provider used to check for just for 2. Um, I actually looked into the documentation, and technically, just by looking at the documentation, the implementation that was running entry was right, because um, there's basically 2 of these OUIs. One is used for ESX and one for VMs running on just plain ESX, and there's another OUI which is for VMs that are started from vCenter. And apparently there was no need to use the other 2, but turns out that is not the case, because um, this user had VMs that were started with one of the other OUI that was not in the list of the valid OUIs in the entry cloud provider. So the patch was just to basically change that behavior and check for all four of the VMware assigned OUIs. Um, this is obviously fixing the problem right now. OUIs are not like very dynamic in nature, so they tend to be assigned every once in a while. So keeping up with the list of new OUIs being assigned to VMware is definitely possible and a manual thing that can be done. But we were debating if the check itself makes any sense. Um, it does make sense for entry, because currently entry is just basically, if the check is not in place, it's basically picking up any MAC address that the VM has, which means that if you have like virtual networks installed inside the node, which is most likely the case, given that you potentially have Docker running, so you have Docker 0 and other virtual NICs in the VM, you may end up with the node patched with a private IP address, which is not the one you want to have. So the filtering for entry is definitely there to stay, and it's probably gonna end up being just like that until entry is deprecated altogether, which is going to happen hopefully before the end of 2020. That's the current timeline for it. And I was wondering, and I think I saw something flying into my inbox today about an issue that was open. I think it was you, David, on the cloud provider at Outer Tree Cloud provider, to just perform this check instead of using a hash table with all the OUIs, but more like check in with the vSphere API and see if the VNIC that we're trying to patch the node IP address for is a vSphere virtual NIC. Is that right?
Yeah, and actually, the only reason why I had really kind of opened it was because Doug had said, "Hey, this patch on the entry is was there, and we need to kind of evaluate it." And he basically had made that comment on the PR that I had open with the CSI zone support. So I just created the issue to basically not lose sight of that, and just to kind of keep the CSI stuff and the CCM stuff separate. Um, Currently, we don't do any MAC address filtering at all, and I'm actually kind of, I don't know, I'm more in the favor of not doing it anyways. And then if anybody wants to consume any of the other stuff, they can kind of figure it out on their own. But right now, we don't expose those IP addresses outside anyways. So I'm not quite sure if we add the filtering, if it adds any value to it, at least right now.
I have a quick question, guys. If we're not doing that in the out of tree provider, how are we grabbing the IP addresses in the out of tree one versus the in tree one? Why is there a disparity?
Are we going to take that or?
I don't know. I thought you were.
Oh yeah, no, like yeah. So currently, all the metadata that's collected, like including IP addresses for the nodes, they're not exposed anywhere external to the cloud provider. So even though we're collecting all this metadata for these nodes, it's not being really used anywhere. And I guess in tree, it probably is in some fashion, one way or another. Maybe for like node identification or whatever, but for the out of tree external provider, we don't use IP addresses at all. We're just collecting it more or less for the sake of collecting it.
I think there's a different implementation, and the in tree and the out of tree have a completely different implementation. In tree has actually different code paths for when the code is run on master nodes and when the code is run on worker nodes. So even the approach of having the worker node that is trying to patch the IP address connect back to vSphere is unfeasible. So for in-tree, we're definitely not going to explore that. And I was thinking more of considering this issue, this basically enhancement to the auditory cloud provider to make sure that we support further use cases like load balancers and so on. Because right now it's probably not needed because we're pretty much not doing anything with the network. But we will potentially do that. Not right now, but for down the road.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
And yeah, that's all I have for this meeting. Any other questions from you folks? All right. If not, I can give you back, I guess, 12 minutes of your time. All right, going once, twice. All right. If you guys have any further comments or questions, there's always the SIG VMware channel on Kubernetes Slack. Please reach out to me or to other folks in there. Just ask your question. We will be happy to help you with any issues you can find. All right. Have a good Wednesday.
Bye.
Bye-bye.